Ladies and gentlemen, we are back live with Charm City Tennis Talk with my man, Landon, great friend of mine. Super excited to break down this Australian Open 2025 recap video. Landon, how you doing on this fine Monday?
Man, I couldn't be doing any better. These last 2 weeks, what a great Australian Open. I mean, don't even know where to start, but the last 2 weeks have been filled with so much tennis and it's been great. So many good matches. A lot's been happening. So let's recap it all.
Absolutely, man. This Australian Open was certainly the expected and the unexpected, right? I mean, on the women's side, Madison Keys, 7.5 years after her previous Grand Slam final, to come in here, take out the number one, the number two, the number seven, was it the number 13?
Yeah.
Because Daniel Collins is in that range, and pulled off this Cinderella story. So I would love to hear your thoughts on Madison Keys and how she was able to pull this one off.
Yeah, well, Madison Keys, I mean, I could not be more ecstatic for her. I could not be more thrilled. I could not be more happy. Um, no one, I mean, everybody works hard, but if there's one person that has been deserving this for the longest time that I've been watching, it's Madison Keys. Since I've been following Madison for, I don't know, 10 years. Um, and I watched her in 2018 at Roland Garros up front and close. And, obviously, her making the finals of the U.S. Open, losing to Sloane Stevens. That was her only ever a major final she's gotten to. Maddie has always been a player that, I always looked at her as a top 10 player, a girl that has a lot of power. She's got a big serve. When she's on it, she's on it. Um, but sometimes, it takes a run to really, really propel you through. She won the tournament the week before. Um, Obviously, playing Danielle Collins to start, to me, that was a tricky matchup because obviously, I thought she would win that. I don't expect her. Nothing's easy in this. Danielle Collins is a huge competitor, decided to come back after, she made the finals last year of the Australian Open. And beating her and then beating, Rybakina, um, you know, a former Grand Slam champion. That was a tough matchup. She was one of the top four favorites to win this event. Then she's a big underdog against Iga Swiatek, who, I mean, it looked like she was playing on clay. She was just back to her old self. And at one point, she was the favorite to win this whole tournament. We were talking about it live. We were like, if she was to face Sabalenka, it would be a great final. So she runs through. Well, she didn't run through Iga. She actually faced a match point. She beat her in the first set. Iga came back in the second set, and then she faced a match point. But 10-8 in the tiebreak, that's wild. And that's the type of stuff you need if you want to get to a Grand Slam final. You need that stuff. Grand Slam final, she's playing the two-time defending champ, looking to three-peat Arya Sabalenka. And, I mean, Sabalenka is on fire, too. She's coming in hot. Her serve, her forehand was unstoppable. So an Iga Sabalenka final would have been one to see. But, Madison obviously pulling that off and such a close matchup. If she would have lost, that would have hurt. But you need to be on your best game and you need to she had the best tournament of her life, of her career. And that's what she needed to do to win this. And it propelled her to the top. The matchup against Sabalenka was a great one to watch. I watched that whole final. It was power versus power. But in the end, Madison just buckled down. She dug deep. And, I think she just got married a few months ago. And her husband, Gordon Frantangelo, is actually a former tennis player who I still watch. And man, I think, having that by her side, having her team, she really believed in herself. And once you believe in yourself, you have the confidence. I mean, she's gone out and beaten the best in the world. She's always been able to. But to beat the top three in the world back to back to back and to do what she did, this will definitely go down as the best week of her career. And if she doesn't ever win another Grand Slam, which it's so hard to do, this is all she needed. Everything else is just a cherry on top for her. So couldn't be happier for Madison. I think this is going to only propel her throughout the year. I still, expect Iga and Sabalenka to, do their thing, but this is definitely a huge momentum boost for Madison in her career.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you kind of touched on this, man, but Keys always had the physical intangibles. She has that power. I think for her is kind of getting over that mental hump. And she said that once she took that pressure off of herself about winning a Grand Slam, it made her so much more comfortable, so much easier for her to just go in there and live free. And you're talking about a tournament where, correct me if I'm wrong, but pre-tournament, you had Sabalenka as the best odds. Second, you had Coco. Third, you had Iga, and then fourth, you had Rybakina, right? So she knocked out three of the best four, projected odds to go into winning this tournament, which, was truly an iconic run. Just following tennis for as long as I have, this was probably one of the most memorable that I can remember on the women's side, just given the level of adversity and difficulty it took to get there. And it just showed that, tennis isn't all about the physical, but it's also the mental and being able to overcome that adversity. And to face a match point versus Iga, turn that around, win that match, and then go into Sabalenka, go into the third set and take that out. I mean, it was just a beautiful sight to see, especially with her being an American. It makes it even sweeter, right?
Couldn't agree more.
So cool beans, man. Well, with that said, obviously the one that we all want to talk about is on the men's side. We put together a video a few weeks ago, man, and we both were leaning pretty strongly that Jannik Sinner would pull this off, and surely he did, man, in amazing fashion. I mean, you're talking about a guy that over the last 10 matches versus top 10 opponents, he hasn't lost a single set. Never been done before. So, I mean, this is a guy that is on a completely different level. I mean, just everything about him. There's no holes in his game. It almost seems like he's a robot on the tennis court because almost every shot is to the tee. It's perfect, and he hardly makes those unforced errors that you're not expecting. So, obviously, can't wait to hear your thoughts on Jannik Sinner and him taking home a back-to-back Australian Open final.
Well, man, you know how I felt about Jannik Sinner before this tournament. We talked about it on our first podcast here. As you know, Jannik Sinner kind of towards the end of last year just made it into a league of his own. Obviously, we had talked about Carlos Alcaraz and him coming up, but we know that Jannik just pulled that last year. And coming into this year, he went through some adversity last year, and he's got a lot of fans, but there's some naysayers and people who don't want to see him do well. And while he was the favorite, nothing's a give me. And I felt pretty confident going into this tournament that this was Jannik's to win. Jannik has been on fire coming to this, but the way I view him now after this tournament is even higher. I took a lot of takeaways from this tournament. He had a pretty nice draw, I think, with Jannik. Obviously, he lost 2 sets total in the tournament. He lost one to Tristan Schoolkate, which props to Tristan Schoolkate because even though, when Sinner drops a set, it doesn't really mean much, He's just going to come back and dominate. Sinner is different. But Tristan Schoolkate is just a challenger-level guy, and even just getting one set off him, that's going to boost his confidence. So we'll see how he does for the rest of the year. But also, Holger Rune got one set off him, but other than that, he just Sinner has no holes in his game. Kind of as you said, he's like a robot. And what I would equate it to is, because if you talk to people, Sinner, what makes him so good and what's frustrating, like what Zverev was saying, is he hits all of his shots. He doesn't miss. So imagine hitting the ball hard every time. You're hitting every shot. I kind of put it like he's like you're putting what Jannik Sinner is in an algorithm. And this is just a perfect algorithm. Everything that this guy does is on point. Everything that he, works on just keeps getting better. And this guy really has no holes in his game. I mean, you talk about a guy like Carlos Alcaraz, who obviously has got a lot of talent. But if you look at his game, what does he need to do to get better to beat Sinner more? Well, he can work on his serve because maybe get some more free points. When it comes to Sinner, he just keeps getting better. And like I said, there's no holes in his game. I think, playing a guy like Zverev in the final, look, Zverev, as we know, no slouch. He's number 2 in the world. He's number 2 in the world for a reason. He was in the finals for a reason. He's been to 3 Grand Slam finals for a reason. Zverev is one of the best players in the world, probably the best player to never win a Grand Slam. And that just shows how hard it is to win a Grand Slam. For all these years, you had Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, and now it's pretty much Sinner and Carlos. And without a doubt, Sinner is on his own level on hard court. I mean, no one's touching him. I think when it comes to Carlos, if we're going to compare, he moves better on different surfaces. Um, but Sinner is so fluid on hard court, and it's just really hard to see like anybody beating him right now. I think what this kind of entails, because he did play a semifinals against Shelton. Shelton did have a set point. Um, this is kind of going to push the Americans, and people to get better because Sinner, as we all know, is levels above. And as we all know, all these guys on the tour, these guys are the best in the world. They're no slouches. They can beat anybody. They could beat Sinner on their best day. But um, these guys, these are just going to, Sinner being where he is just going to push these guys even more. And another thing that I would like to allude to is the fact that if we look at the big difference between um, this matchup where Zverev and Sinner were playing in the finals versus the 2023 U.S. Open, I like to look back at as Sinner lost to Zverev in the final set, 3-2. And I think the biggest takeaway from that, what I noticed what Sinner didn't have then that he has now, is he's been utilizing his drop shot a lot more. And the fact that he has the drop shot now is just a totally, it's just another tool in the arsenal that he just keeps adding. And that's what's scary about Sinner because he just has all these tools in the box that we haven't even uncovered yet. The drop shot is great because he plays a guy like Alcaraz and he can just totally change up the speed of the game. So, I was so happy for Sinner. And like I said, it's great. He's great for tennis right now. Best on hard court. I really don't see anyone beating him. And honestly, if I had to think of Sinner's biggest opponent right now, it would be water.
Yeah, no, I love that. And we talk about pure dominance, right? I mean, Yannick Sinner was just the third men's tennis player to not face a break point, right? Since 2000. The other two, Roger Federer in the 03 Wimbledon, and number two, Rafael Nadal in 2017 U.S. Open. Those are the only other two men's tennis players that never really had to face some major adversity, and it's just such a credit to what Sinner was able to bring to the table this past weekend. But part of me really wonders, like, where does Zverev go from here, right? I mean, we saw several years ago Tsitsipas reach number two, reach finals, and kind of just took steps back in his career. I mean, I looked at a stat the other day. Zverev is the sixth player to lose his first three men's single Grand Slam finals, right? So you've got Andre Agassi, Goran Ivanisevic, Andy Murray, Dominic Thiem, Casper Ruud, and Zverev of those six players. And out of that list, only Ruud and Zverev don't have a Grand Slam yet. So all the other players were able to achieve that level of greatness. But he had opportunities. I think that he's too conservative, as we allude to all the time when he reaches these big moments. Whether it's these long rallies and not taking chances, or it was in the eighth service game of the match where Zverev just ended up giving up a break, and he had opportunities to get over that service game, but was just making too many unforced errors. And when you play Sinner, sure, you have to be on, but you've got to be overly aggressive. And I think when we watched that Djokovic-Zverev first set before Joker retired, we saw that Zverev was truly unable or unwilling to take those chances, to take those risks, and it ultimately paid off. Paid dividends in the end. So hat goes off to Sinner, man. It's just truly miraculous what he's able to accomplish. This is a guy that has a very, very interesting statistic that I want to share with you. So it took Roger Federer 17 Grand Slams to win his first title, right? It took Yannick Sinner also 17 Grand Slams to win his first title. Now, It took Roger Federer 21 Grand Slams to win his third title. Well, it took Sinner 21 Grand Slams to win his third title. So it's a very interesting trajectory. And I think Sinner is only 22 years old. So we're going to see him at the top of the sport for the next 10, 12, maybe even 15 years. And you talk about the trajectory, right? I mean, he is on pace to be one of the greatest ever. He continues to get better. He continues to have a solid team behind him and continues to evolve. There's really going to be no one that touches him unless we see the Brazilian, Joao Fonseca, grow into something great.
Oh man! So, well, speaking on Sinner again, like you mentioned, he's 23 years old. The way I view Sinner right now, because at one point people were like, "Oh, is Alcaraz that next dominant guy?" Novak Djokovic, in my opinion, is the greatest of all time. And there was for many years where he was just dominant. You would have Federer, Nadal, and you would have the guys that would dominate everybody else. But then you would have Djokovic, who was just on top. And whenever he played guys, I just always had that confidence and mindset that, man, he's just levels above, and he's gonna beat everybody he plays. Obviously, you don't win every match, but with Sinner, that's how I view him now. I'm viewing Sinner in the same category as I viewed Djokovic. Sinner is just levels above everybody right now. His game keeps getting better. He's like you said, he's 23 years old. Obviously, we talk a lot about Carlos. I brought up several times. Carlos has a great personality. He's great for tennis, and I think more fans might attract to his personality. But as far as Sinner, he's my favorite right now. I just love his demeanor. He's very calm, very relaxed. He's been going through a lot, and just kind of how he handles adversity, very humble, and he knows the talent he has. All the players know the talent he has, but very humble, and he just keeps working. And so with Sinner, yeah, the sky's the limit. Which I'm very interested to see is how he translates to the other surfaces. Obviously, clay. His game, to me, Sinner's game translates to everything. Now, the one thing about clay is it might slow down the ball a little bit. How does he move? But I mean, the way I look at Sinner right now, like who's beating him? I mean, yes, Carlos could beat him on clay, but like Wimbledon, like Carlos is still the favorite, but it's neck and neck with that. So that should be interesting. But on a hard court, I mean, Sinner, I expect him to do pretty well in the Masters this year. Obviously, Indian Wells, Miami Open. Hopefully, we don't see any injuries or any unforeseen circumstances. But yeah, man, with Sinner, the sky's the limit, as we know. And that's, talking about getting into guys, you're talking about Zverev and Tsitsipas. Those guys have been to Grand Slam finals. And I still think Zverev is very capable, and he could very much so win a Grand Slam one day. That just shows how hard it is because he's he's one of the best in the world, number two, and we're still having these questions. When it comes to Sinner, we undoubtedly know he's going to win multiple more Grand Slams. When it comes to Alcaraz, we know that. But as, a guy like Tsitsipas and Zverev, as they get older, it's only going to keep getting harder because, yes, Federer and Nadal left, and Djokovic is getting older on his way out. But then you have Sinner, who's arrived. You have Alcaraz arrived. But even besides those guys, put those guys apart, we talked about this before the tournament. And it's just funny we talked about it before the tournament because, guys like Lerner Tien, guys like you said, Joey Fonseca, guys like Jacob Mesnick, just the young and up-and-comer guys who I've been following since their junior days, following since the ITF circuit, Lerner Tien going on a 30-game winning streak last year. It was awesome to see, how their game translates to the main tour, the main level against the top guys in the world. Obviously, Joey Fonseca winning back-to-back challengers. Watching Lerner and Joao go through qualifying, and once they got into the main draw, I was like, man, they're going to make some noise. And I could not be prouder of both of them. Obviously, first off, we'll talk about Lerner. Lerner is a guy that he's got a high ceiling. Do I think it's going to be as high as Joao's? No, but Lerner's got a pretty high ceiling, and beating Medvedev was huge. That's a huge confidence booster. So couldn't be happier for Lerner. He deserves it. He's definitely going to be making some noise. And as far as winning Grand Slams, that's a whole nother thing. But you can win tournaments. You can be that guy. You can compete. But the things that it takes to win a Grand Slam, the talent that it takes, is the talent that Joey Fonseca has, And this is a guy that I've been talking about, me. I've been following him since the junior days. Actually, funny enough, him and Lerner played each other in the U.S. Open Finals last year in the juniors. But Joao winning his first round matchup against Rublev. He was a slight dog, but that was awesome. Beating in straight sets, your first Grand Slam match, beating one of the top 10 in the world. And then his second round matchup, he goes through. And then, Sonego is a guy that it was an interesting matchup. Should Fonseca won, he had a great shot. He was definitely the favorite. But Sonego, some guys as they get older in their careers, they just get more mature. The game slows down for them. and playing a young up and comer that has a lot of talent. It's very mental. So I was hoping to see him go far, especially as a qualifier in his first Grand Slam. But I think that we took a lot of positives, a lot of takeaways from that Grand Slam with the young guys, Joao and Lerner. Like I said, even a guy like Jacob Mesnick. I would like to see him make a little farther. But these guys are all knocking on the door. So not only do you have to have Sinner and Alcaraz, and even guys like Ben Shelton, Taylor Fritz, and all these young, all these up and coming guys to win a Grand Slam. If you're Zverev or Tsitsipas trying to get back to it. But then you have these young up and comers who are hungry, like Joao and Jacob Mesnick. So years ago we wondered what tennis was going to be like without Nadal, without Federer, and soon to be eventually without Djokovic. But I couldn't be happier for tennis and the route it's going. And this was a great tournament for that. I mean, obviously, if you pay attention to tennis or if you don't, these big names, on different countries. But Brazil hasn't had a big star since like Gustavo Kirchhoff, and I think he won about maybe 3 Grand Slams, if I'm right. But yeah, I definitely see Joao winning Grand Slams in his future. But it's never a give me as long as you have Carlos and Sinner around. I just hope, none of these guys get injured or none of them just. I hope they're always able to play in these big Grand Slam tournaments.
100%. Yeah. And, just to retouch on Zverev, man, I mean, this is a guy that has won, 23 men's single titles, right? He's won gold at Olympics, and he's given so much success to the sport. And it just shows, like you said, man, how difficult it is to win a Grand Slam, because you can have all the talent in the world. But can you truly dig deep, right? Can you endure tennis physical activity for 4.5, sometimes even 5 hours to a win? And that's what makes Sinner so great is, again, you could have all the physical intangibles, all the talent in the world, but do you have that mental mindset to overcome that adversity, stay calm in those moments? And I think Sinner's personality really does translate to his game, because he's just not erratic. He's not erratic. He stays in form. And, you got to beat him fair and square. He's not going to give off anything there. So aside from the finals, I thought there was a lot of inspiring young players, coming up that, you touched on, man, right? Lerner, Tien, and certainly Fonseca, both knocking out 2 top 10 guys. So, the future of tennis is so incredibly bright. I think for at least next several years, Sinner is undoubtedly going to be the man to beat. So it'd be really intriguing to see how these other players evolve and to see if they can reach that form. Pretty disappointing tournament for Carlos, but I think that he'll certainly be back. Surely we're waiting for that, Sinner Alcaraz Grand Slam final, which hopefully we get at some point this year. But yeah, while Sinner had quite an easy walk to the finals, you can't take anything away from him, because in that finals there, we saw that this man was just truly dominant over the number 2 in the world. So yeah, cannot wait. What is the next Grand Slam? Is it Roland Garros?
It's in the French Open.
Okay.
You got the French Open, and then you got Wimbledon, and then you got U.S. Open. But back to not to discredit, because I know we've talked about this before. We kind of like said that Sinner has a cakewalk to the finals. I've said this before over and over again. Everybody in these tournaments, they're all top players. They're the best in the world. They can beat pretty much anybody. When we say it's a cakewalk, it's kind of for Sinner, because Sinner is on a different level, and pretty much, yeah, it was a cakewalk for him, as we saw. The finals was not one of his harder matchups, but going back to I haven't brought up Djokovic much, but man, Djokovic just showed another reason in this tournament why he's the GOAT. Obviously, there was we've talked about this. There was some weird stuff going on with the crowd. There was some weird stuff going on with the reporters. But the fact that, I loved what Alexander Zverev said after the post-match interview about how, it just kind of showed a more emotional side and a more vulnerable side of these people's lives, that, it's bigger than tennis. And, Zverev was going through a lot. Djokovic was there for him. And these guys have played with each other for years. They've watched him mature, watched him grow. And I love what Zverev said. And He's like, guys, Novak gave it his all. If he could play, he would have played. We've seen Novak win with injuries. The fact that he beat Carlos Alcaraz with a torn quadricep, I don't know if it was torn before that, but he lost the first set, and then, we expected, Carlos should have just rolled after that. I don't know what happened, but, Novak got some medicine, whatever, and then pure adrenaline kicked in. And that's what's crazy about the human body, because pure adrenaline kicked in. I wasn't even sure if he was going to play his next match. That was a great first set against Zverev. He had a few break points. He had, it was a very close match. And if he would have won that set, he said he would have gave it a shot for the second set. But obviously he was holding on by a limb. With that being said, Carlos, he's got some growing to do. He's still young, and we tend to forget that. I think that eventually, whether it's this year by the French Open, whether it's in a few months, he's gonna get back into his form and back to his groove. I think that this type of stuff is good for him. It's very humbling. But yeah, Novak Djokovic being injured, being a 37-year-old GOAT playing the young up and comer future. Even though it was just a quarterfinals match, I think there was a lot of significance to that. And, I'm just happy for Djokovic for winning that. But obviously, I wish him a speedy recovery. And look, I would love to have him back for the French. I would love to have him back for Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. But this is the first time I'm saying, if Djokovic is not in it, it's not like we're missing who would have won. If Sinner is not in the tournament or Alcaraz is not in the tournament, that's huge. But with that being said, definitely looking forward to the French. Obviously, we got some hardcore tournaments before that, but the French Open will be very interesting because it's a different surface. And look, if Yannick plays like this, it's going to take a guy like Alcaraz or somebody that's on top of their game on a different surface to beat him.
Absolutely. And, you look at Sinner's season last year, right? He had 72 or 73 wins in the entire season. We could see him surpass that, right? He's just so young and he's only getting stronger. We watched Sinner, 2023, 2024. This is a guy that hadn't really built into his game yet and was still growing physiologically because, at the end of the day, these guys their brain isn't done growing until they're 25. And physically, they kind of don't have that grown man strength, as we'd say in like a UFC type matchup. So, this is a guy, he's only going to be getting better. And I think we can see him surpass that this season. I don't see any reason why he can't have an even better season. And quite frankly, Landon, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going into 2026 and Sinner won all 4 Grand Slams this year. It wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't, because obviously Joker being 37, he was able to beat Alcaraz in that matchup where after that first set, he was literally limping to the back. And here's where they inject him with the horse tranquilizers and bada bing, bada boom, he's back in business. But, I think it really did tell us, I don't think it's time for Joker to pass the torch. But I do think that if we do somehow see a Joker Sinner final, I just can't see Joker in whatever form he's in getting past the athleticism of Sinner. I could be very wrong. I could be eating my words because, again, Joker is the GOAT. But it's just going to be so tough for him to get past Sinner at this point in his career. So, if Sinner rolls here and sweeps the Grand Slams, it wouldn't surprise me. Surely by the end of this year, we'll do a bit of a recap of all the Grand Slams in one. So I'm really excited for that. But I know throughout the season, man, we'll certainly touch on some ATP 500 tournaments, some ATP 250s, and
Challengers, ITF.
Yeah, dude, I'm always
hit it all,
man. Absolutely.
Speaking of the torch, you talking about the torch. And it's funny because when Alcaraz beat Djokovic in Wimbledon, we thought that was the passing of a torch. Beats him again, did Novak pass the torch to Carlos? Then, as we saw last year,
and he won gold.
Kind of, even though it was just the Olympics, that was the biggest thing for Djokovic. If he never wins another Grand Slam again, I think that he's fine with it as long as he got the Olympics, which to me, yeah, same. But that was kind of like, hey, I'm the man, I'm still here. If Sinner played, if Sinner played Djokovic in a Grand Slam, that would be the best chance of Sinner losing right now is probably to Djokovic. But, I think the torch has kind of already been passed. And the torch is with Sinner right now. And if you want to come take the torch from Sinner, you're going to have to beat him. And, it would take something like a prime Novak Djokovic to do that. Obviously, like I said, anybody can beat anybody on any given day. But if you're gonna beat Sinner, you better be on your best game, and he better not be on his best game.
100%. 100%. And I think like theoretically, you're right. The pass has been torched, but I feel like we need that like solidification of the torch being passed. And I think we'll eventually see that once Sinner sees Joker in a Grand Slam. I don't know which Grand Slam it'll be. I don't know how the draws will be written, but I do have an eerie feeling that they will have a matchup in a Grand Slam this year. And I think that'll give us like the confirmation stamp that like, look, this is Sinner's game for the taking. And just to kind of touch on Italian tennis, man. Aside from Sinner, Italian tennis is so deep in the top 100. I believe I saw something this morning. There's 11 Italians in the top 100, and that's just miraculous, man. So, of course, Musetti just won bronze at the Olympics, but yeah, man,
semifinals at Wimbledon.
Exactly. So, yeah, man, they're so deep there. But what an incredible tournament! Just full of joy, full of seeing our youth, grow into themselves and what the future holds for them. And then certainly just what dominance is all about in the finals. So, was there anything else that you wanted to chop up?
Speaking about the youth, obviously, like you said, great tournament. I think it was a great tournament to start the year. We watched so much of it. Another thing that I like to do, obviously talking about the youth, is junior tennis. I don't follow junior tennis as much, but what I do follow is Challenger tours, ITF tours, and people from junior tennis can play on ITF events. So I went to an ITF event in December. So it was last month, and it was this girl Hannah Klugman, who is the future of English tennis, and she's one of the top juniors. And this girl Wanabe Sonobe, correct me if I might be pronouncing that wrong, but she actually lost that match. But she was one of the top juniors. So obviously when this draw came out, the junior Grand Slam, I followed it and kind of just kept an eye on it, watched some matches. And Sonobe, who I actually watched, in the ITF event last month, professional event, she won the Junior Australian Open. She ended up winning 6-0, 6-1 in the finals. So that's obviously, something to look out for. It was actually the first Japanese girl to ever do that. But who knows what these become. There's a lot of people that have won juniors who, never really make it. But as far as the future of tennis, there's a lot of young and up-and-coming stars. But basically what it boils down to is the mental, can you fight through adversity? Because you have to go through a lot of adversity. You don't just come up and win right away. And it's a grind, It's a grind every week. These people that are playing at the ITF circuits trying to, keep grinding their way to the top. And that's why eventually when these people do break through, I know Madison Keys has been around for a while, but it's just like all that hard work, all these years. Like these tennis players, they don't stop. They're going 11 months out of the year. They're traveling at the lower levels. They're barely scraping by. So, you have to have the heart. And that's why, like I said, when I see these players coming from the ITFs or the challengers that are a little older, you kind of love to see it. The last thing I'll say is a guy like Mitchell Kruger, 31 years old, and got his first Grand Slam win. I mean, he's been, challenger tour guy for a while. So you never know. Sometimes it just takes a certain time of your life. Sometimes it takes age. But as time goes on, these players figure it out. Some, die with time. Some adjust with it. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with the future. But like I said, there's a bright future of tennis, and I know that we talked about the Australian men's boys winner, and they're comparing him to Federer with that one-handed backhand. So that's a lot of pressure, but yeah, bright future, and there's just so much to look out for,
Absolutely, man. And I'm just looking at the schedule here. The first ATP 500 of the year is in the Netherlands and also in Dallas as well, the Dallas Open and the ABN AMRO Open, in Rotterdam. So this is in, I want to say mid-February. Let's see here, February 3rd, February 9th. So by all means,
you you have a 250 tournament going on right now in
Correct.
France, and you have
Yeah.
but yep, the first 500 tournament will be in February, and then you also have during that time also the Dallas Open, um, and then yeah, man, we're getting ready to it. The something I'm looking forward to this year is Indian Wells and the Miami Open. You know, obviously two of the you have 9 master tournaments as opposed to 4 Grand Slam tournaments. The Masters are the biggest tournaments for the ATP Tour, so yeah, Indian Wells and Miami is definitely something I've circled. But so we got to love about tennis. So many tournaments, and you know it's going to be a long year. It's so we'll see how the Australian Open, how these players carry the momentum, and how it plays out for the rest of the year.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, bro, absolute pleasure breaking down this first major tournament with you, bro, and really excited to continue chopping it up, breaking it down, and certainly at the end of the year we'll be able to look back and see who reigns supreme. So with that said, Charm City Tennis Talk. Thank you again, Landon, and we'll catch you on the flip side, brother.